some sellers thought that you were mandating them to pay a buyer broker compensation, right? Now, whether that's true or not, again, I wasn't in the room, but that's the basis of the entire settlement was that, they didn't feel like they had the choice of paying the buyer's agent.
As we know, we always know everything's negotiable when it comes to commissions and all that stuff. But there was a select group of people that felt as if they were not aware of that or weren't correctly explained it. And then that's what kind of spurred the start of this whole thing.
Yeah, so the NAR was always like, we do have to mandate that you do have to pay $1, right? That was always the minimum commission that you had to pay.
So there was a minimum commission
there
to make
was
it
a
a legal contract.
To make it a legal contract. And that's what shifted to NAR coming out and saying, well, actually now it's 0. But there was a minimum expectation you had to pay the buyer's agent. It was $1.
In Minnesota, we have for decades, this has not been an invisible thing that it works this way.
No, I mean, Minnesota's actually been on the forefront of a lot of things. Right? We have a buyer broker compensation disclosure. We have to have contracts. And there's states out there that don't require them.
Right.
Or they didn't require them. Right. So,
but now they are.
They are. Now, we can talk in like how agents operate their business very differently. So you could say that, well, a lot of agents misuse their language in real estate. You could say, hey, just sign this paperwork. It doesn't even affect you. Right? So there are some things that came of it or will be coming from it.
Got it.
For example, I know we're in Roseville right now, but let's say you wanted to go to Egan. How many different ways could you drive from here to Egan? If you put it in MapQuest or you put it in Google Maps or whatever it is, how many different ways could you go?
Yeah, dozens.
5 to 10.
Yeah.
So let's say one of them takes us 25 minutes, one takes us 20, and one takes us 18. I think a lot of us have kind of found ways to take 18-minute routes all over the place. Right. And I think now we're just going to be in this position where may have to take 20 or 25 minutes. The destination is the same. Nothing is changing in what we're trying to do. We're still fiduciary responsibilities to our client. We're still trying to get them to closing. Right. Everything's changed in that, or not changed in that regard, but the distance and how we're going to get there is going to change in some capacity.
Fantastic analogy, Matt.
I spend a lot of time with agents and I hear a lot of different verbiage, but how many times I heard, well, you have this huge advocate in your corner. I'm your buyer's agent. And guess what? You don't have to pay me for that. That is a complete, I've heard that time and time again. And that's not correct, right? In terms of how the verbiage is made. So I think that this big NAR settlement just puts a big spotlight on everything and making us all do a better job at our jobs, right? And
that's fair.
When we sit down with the seller and we go through commission basis, it's like, my fee, let's just say, is 3.3%. Right. And then all the times like, well, we didn't talk that way. Most people talked in languages of we charge 6%.
Okay.
Right. Or 7 or 5, whatever that number is. And instead of saying, hey, Matt Healy or the Pomerleau team, we're going to charge 3.3% for our services to help you sell the home. What would you like to pay the buyer agent that brings us a buyer? So I think that's in how people have done the business over the years. They've kind of skirted the real way of doing it, in my opinion.
So you can't take the 18-mile route.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. How do you test drive an agent?
We practice this every week at the team, right? We sit down and we go through what are some of the scenarios, and a lot of it is how to be effective in bringing buyers to the office and showing the value and why that's important to them.
Right.
When the consumer is so used to instant gratification, saying, "Hey, let's go look at this home at 2:00 on Saturday." Great, I'll see you at the house.
Right.
Nothing's signed, nothing's talked about. Nothing's been delivered. So when I look at it from a perspective of why this is a good thing is when I go show a property, some agent's seller has already predetermined what my value is. I prefer to say, hey, buyer, this is my value and these are why I'm worth this amount. And we're going to go to a home and there's a good chance that this fee is totally covered. But if it isn't, we have to understand what that looks like for you.
All right.
And so they just might have to pay whatever that difference is from what was offered by the seller to what you had them sign in an agreement is what your commission will be, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And they agree to that. Yeah. What prevents the general consumer to just finding homes on homes.com or wherever and just going to the listing agent and saying, hey, I want to see this property?
Here's what I think. God help the consumer that comes to me that doesn't have an agent that thinks they're going to get a deal.
Yeah.
because honestly, my loyalty is to my seller.
Yep.
I have to get the best terms possible for them. Loyalty, obedience, disclosure, confidential, reasonable care in accounting. I have to do what they tell me to, legal, ethical, it's the business, right?
Absolutely.
So I'm going to get them the highest dollar amount possible. And I'm going to go to somebody that without representation.
Right.
I wouldn't do that against
No.
myself.
No.
I wouldn't come against me like that.
No.
Or a lot of listing agents the same way have that same mindset. Like, I'm going to get the most money possible for my seller and get a deal? No, probably not. You're probably going to end up paying more.
Yeah.
Right. What do you feel like have been some of the misconceptions out there?
So I've had a lot of sellers say, hey, Matt, do we just redo a contract where it shows I don't pay the buyer's agent anymore?
Right.
I was like, well, tell me what you've been reading.
Right.
Oh yeah, that's a good
Why
one.
would you think to ask that?
Why would
Answer a question with a question and it makes sense.
This is the one change that since I've been in the industry for 15 plus years, that it is the consumer really has like done a lot of reading and research, right? The average consumer actually does 37 minutes or 34 minutes of research per day when they're looking to sell or purchase a home. And a lot of that, a good percentage of that is about the NAR settlement in terms of like what that means for them. But do I think that there's going to be a light switch? I think a lot of sellers' misconception is that on August 15th or July 1st, whatever it is,
whatever it is,
that all of a sudden the light turns off and now I don't pay a buyer's agent commission, I don't think is truly a good depiction of what's going to happen personally, right? I think that 80% of everything is going to stay the exact same way. And then we're going to have the disruptors both for charging more and charging less come into the market and be that other 20%. If somebody came to me and said, Matt, I want you to list my home, and I'm not willing to pay a buyer's agent, that's just not something I'm willing to do.
Right.
Despite my best efforts explaining it to them, I'm going to get in that contract most likely. We've always talked about if the home doesn't sell, you do X, Y, and Z, time on market, all these things happen. We're going to talk about a price correction, right?
Right.
Now we're going to be talking about, well, maybe the first thing we have to do is actually offer a buyer's broker commission or pay a buyer's agent more and see what that does, right? So I think in my contracts, I'll most likely go to the way of saying if we're at the time of a price correction, maybe the first thing we do is actually start offering a buyer's agent commission.
Right. Yeah.
Because there's going to be people that just want to try and see what happens.
Okay.
Right. I've already seen it substantially. Hey, we're listing a $300,000 house. And let's just say commission's normally $9,000. Well, we're offering the buyer broker $1,500. Right? I see it literally every day that the buyer broker commission is getting squeezed.
Right.
And it's going to force agents to either work for free,
unknowingly
work for free, work for a substantial discount because they don't know how to have those conversations, or get really good at articulating their value and why we're
which is why it's such an important conversation right now, that people understand how to have a good value proposition and correctly educate their clients.